Happy Christmas from all of us at Solas. Well, I don't know about you, as we approach the Christmas season, which does quite frankly seem to start earlier every single year, sometimes, just sometimes, I confess I find myself feeling just that tinsy-wincy bit jaded. Because Christmas can, if you're not careful, can't it descend into that kind of same old, same old. Every year it's the same cycle of family visits. Every year it's the same old stuff on the table at Christmas dinner. And you know, turkey's great, but I have had it for the previous 49 Christmases. Every year it's the same old repeats or variations of them on television. Every year it's that same old expectation of maybe you'll get that amazing present that will transform your life. But again, it's a pair of socks and a lime green jumper from Auntie Edna. And every year we think it's going to be different, and this Christmas will be the one that we remember. But every year the same thing happens. Come the 26th, 27th of December, we've largely forgotten it all. And I don't mean to be cynical, but I wonder whether one of the things that's going on is we've loaded too much onto Christmas. We've made so much about all of that sort of noise and dance around it, but missed what's underneath. You see, have you ever wondered if there is more to Christmas than those things I've just described? Have you ever wondered? Well, one way to explore that question a little bit is to think about some of the deeper questions of life, and Christmas is a great time to do that. You know, it's part of the Christmas season now. Of course, after Christmas we have New Year. That's often a time we think about resolutions and our life and so on. Perhaps for some of you, or friends of some of you, this might be a time that you perhaps darken the doors of a church for the first time. And I have many friends and family who will go to church on Christmas Day, other times they wouldn't. And maybe it's just a time of year when we just naturally perhaps stop a bit more and think about life's big questions and what it's all about. Hey, especially after a year like 2022 as well, when so much has gone on. Well, as we think about the big questions of life, here are 4 questions that I think can be really helpful to reflect on. You can reflect on them at any time, but actually at Christmas time, it's a particularly powerful time to reflect on them. What are the questions? Well, a great question to begin thinking about is, you know, if there is a God, what is God like? You might think about the question, why is there so much suffering in the world? Look what's happened this year with Ukraine. You might think about the question, okay, given all the suffering in the world, what's actually wrong with the world when you get right down to it? What's actually gone wrong with the world? And then you might ask the question, well, what's the solution to what's gone wrong with the world? What I find fascinating is that Christmas addresses all 4 of those questions, actually. All 4 of those questions lie at the heart of the Christmas story as told through the pages of the Bible and the start of the life and biography of Jesus Christ. Take that first question, what is God like? Well, at the heart of the Christmas story is, in fact, the biggest miracle in the whole of the Bible. The Bible's full of miracles, and maybe you know some of them, but the biggest miracle in the Bible is not when God created the world, it's not when Jesus turned water into wine or walked on the water, or even actually when he rose from the dead. I think the biggest miracle in the Bible is when the God of the universe steps into space and time and history in the person of Jesus, when the infinite becomes finite for us. That's a mind-blowing miracle. But the Bible claims that's what happened that first Christmas, that Jesus is God with us. Which means if you want to begin thinking about what God is like, you don't need to sort of think about abstract philosophical thoughts or, vague ideas about some ethereal being out here somewhere. You can take a look at the life of Jesus. You can read the biographies of Jesus found in the New Testament. Take a look at Jesus, the one who said, if you want to know what God is like, look at me. And it's also an amazing idea, isn't it, that God would come to us. He doesn't ask us to come to him, but he comes to us. First thought. Second thought, suffering. It's interesting how much suffering is part of the Christmas story. One of the things I sometimes get fed up about is the way that we take, or our popular culture takes the Christmas story and sort of sanitizes it. But we miss the fact the original Christmas story was pretty messy, right? There was suffering at the heart of it. You've got Mary and Joseph. Mary heavily pregnant, having to make this long journey on donkey across rough terrain and horrible roads. And the reason they're having to do that, by the way, is because the occupying, oppressing army is forcing a census onto people so they can extract more taxation from them. When they finally arrive in Bethlehem, there is famously no room in the inn, so they're squashed into the animal shelter, and Mary gives birth surrounded by animals. And so you've got to think of that as not a cute little Christmas card with a donkey with a hat at a jaunty angle, but a place of noise and smell and dirt and chaos. Last place you'd want to bring a baby. And then, of course, in the Christmas story, you've got the figure of Herod hovering on the outside of that story, this evil tyrant of a king who is so terrified by the idea that a new king might might have been born. He ends up killing all the baby boys in and around Bethlehem in an attempt in that great genocide to catch the infant Messiah. And the fact that the suffering built into that story, right at the start of Jesus' story, reminds me that God is not afraid of suffering. Sometimes we can sit there and think, man, you know, God's up there in heaven, it must be really easy, what would he know? But the Bible is no, actually, God is not afraid of suffering. God doesn't run away from suffering, God steps in to suffering. And if this has been a difficult year for you, remember that a God who stepped into history is a God who longs to be invited to draw near to you, even in the place of mess and brokenness and darkness, if that's where your life is right now. But two last thoughts. We've talked about what God is like, we've talked about suffering. What's gone wrong with the world? What's gone wrong with the world? You know, it's easy to look around the problems of the world and go, well, quite frankly, what we need is more money. We need more science and technology, better healthcare. You know, we need to fix Twitter. We need more politicians. Actually, no one goes for that last one, funnily. No one says that's the problem of the world. There's not enough politicians around. But it's very tempting to look at all these other things. But Christmas reminds us of something much deeper, actually. There's a very famous quotation from, I think, about 100 years ago, and it's attributed to various different writers, so I don't actually know what the original source is, but it runs like this. It says, if our problem was education, then God would have sent us an educator. If our problem was not enough technology, then God would have sent us a scientist. If our problem was not enough money, God could have sent us an economist. But our problem was a need for forgiveness. And so God sent us a saviour. What if the problem underneath all the other problems our world is facing is actually the brokenness and the mess and the nastiness in every human heart, including mine and including yours? And in which case, isn't it amazing that God looks at you and says, take a look at Jesus, my gift to you this Christmas, and the way to forgiveness. And then lastly, what's the solution? Well, we've talked a bit about that. It's that offer of forgiveness and reconciliation there in the person of Jesus. And you know, as I enter this Christmas season, you know, whether you're like me, a little bit jaded, whether you love Christmas and all the trappings, don't get distracted by those trappings from the thing underneath it, that most radical invitation of all that God offers to you this Christmas, that actually there is forgiveness possible, relationship with him possible, and adoption into his family. You know, family can be a difficult time for some of us at Christmas. Some of us have got wonderful families and we look forward to spending Christmas with them. Others of us have problematic families and it can be difficult. Perhaps other of us that have no family. I find it wonderful that at the heart of the true Christmas message is the offer of real family, an adoption into God's family. God invites you to become not just a follower, but a son or a daughter, a child of him, through that gift he gave to you first Christmas in the person of Jesus. Check it out this Christmas, and I pray that for you it is a wonderful season, no matter where you are or who you're spending it with.